So yesterday, we discussed how Donald Trump gave a speech at Liberty University, which is, of course, a super, super Christian school. And naturally, he pretended to be really religious, and he face-planted. So he said 2 Corinthians when he was trying to quote the Bible. The reality is it's 2 Corinthians. All people who are, big-time Christians will know this. So there was even some laughter in the crowd when he said 2 Corinthians. And then I believe he went on to say, this is what the whole bowl game's about, am I right? 2 Corinthians, this is the one you like, am I right? It was just sad to watch, and it's obvious that he's clueless. But like I said yesterday, that's not going to matter. So even though he's going to go into this super religious university and pretend like he's super religious, and it's going to be an act, it's going to at least be the case that this doesn't hurt him in the polls and he'll stay the same, he'll just cruise. Or, perhaps the opposite happens and he'll get a bump, because every other time there was some scandal involving Trump and some controversy about some stupid thing he said, he always rose in the polls, or he always had people who became bigger admirers of him after a gaffe, whether it's calling Mexicans rapists, or saying we should ban all Muslims from entering the U.S., or saying we should bomb the families of ISIS, not ISIS, the families of ISIS, and all the trillion things that he said. So we have a new admirer. Now we have a new admirer after his fake Christian act the other day, and it happens to be the head of Liberty University. So Jerry Falwell Jr. Has something to say about Trump. He said, and I quote, "Donald Trump lives a life of loving and helping others, as Jesus taught." Okay, he just compared Donald Trump to Jesus. And then also he goes on to compare him to Martin Luther King Jr. and his dad. Now, for those of you who don't know, this guy, Jerry Falwell Jr., his dad is obviously Jerry Falwell, and this guy is a famous, well-known preacher, I should say an infamous preacher, who kind of founded and started this political movement, the religious right, and it actually started because he was in favor of segregation. And he was also a big advocate of apartheid in South Africa. Just a really loathsome scumbag guy. But this guy, his son, is like, oh, Donald Trump is so amazing, he's so great, even though he's pretending to be Christian. He's like Jesus himself. He's like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's like my dad. That makes no sense in a variety of different ways. So first of all, you can't say somebody's like MLK and your dad, because they were opposites. In fact, Jerry Falwell denounced Martin Luther King. He spoke about that all the time. So there's just a contradiction here. But this is a classic case of, if you can't beat him, join him. History proves MLK was right, the civil rights movement was right. Oh yeah, no, totally, we were on their side all along. I mean, this is what my dad was fighting for, even though he was fighting for the opposite of it. And Donald Trump is like MLK and my dad and Jesus. Who compares Donald frickin' Trump to Jesus? Even if you like Donald Trump, as these guys clearly do, you can admit he ain't like Jesus. When you go by the message of Jesus, now yes, I understand in Christianity and in the Bible, it's mixed. You could find a backing for any message, whether it's genocide and slavery, or it's kind, happy things and helping the poor and being liberal in many respects. But the Jesus of the New Testament, by and large, was a pacifist, was somebody who wanted to do nothing except help the poor, was kind to immigrants and refugees. Donald Trump stands for the polar opposite of that. He's like, no, I don't care. Donald Trump is great. Jesus is great. I'm just going to say they're both great, even though that makes no sense. But the reason why I bring you this story is because it highlights something that we've been speaking about for a while. And there was another great article about this the other day. I believe it was in The Guardian, where they said, no, you don't get it. The one thing that, links Donald Trump to all of his supporters, and the reason why he has such a fervent following, is that, very simply, he's an authoritarian. And there are people in the country and just in the world who are looking for a strong leader, a guy who's arrogant and brazen and tells them they're cool and the other is bad. And once authoritarians find their leader, that's it. There's no, like, you throw any rational thought that they were even capable of beforehand, which is not that much to begin with, just throw it out the window. Because the mode of thinking is just us versus them. Good guy, bad guy. Black and white. No nuance, no gray, no nothing, no, hey, let's look at each individual claim and fact check it and see if sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong. No. This guy, Jerry Falwell Jr., looks at Donald Trump and he goes, that's it, leader. I agree with him. Now I will defend everything he's ever said. And oh yeah, he's like every good person who's ever lived that I adore. He's like Jesus. He's like MLK. He's like my dad, even though there's a contradiction there. So it's this gross black and white thinking where they're looking for a leader so they can shut off their mind and let this guy do whatever, and they just go into defense mode. Now, guys, say what you want about the problems on the left, and there are many. That's not how the left thinks. It's just not. I mean, you know, the base on the left, we are the most critical of President Obama. We are the most critical of establishment Democrats. We'll give you breakdowns as to where exactly they're wrong. Flip the script, the base on the right, they're known for being the most loyal to whoever they fall in line behind. This is a historical truism between the right wing of the political spectrum and the left wing of the spectrum all around the world, throughout history. Now, obviously, there's a weird mix, and it's like the spectrum kind of meets at certain points when you have some kinds of Marxism and communism and fascism. They're very similar in many ways. It's an authoritarian left and an authoritarian right. But by and large, historically, this has more been a characteristic of the right. And it's this weird mindset that certain people fall into where it's no longer about listening and being critical, turning on that critical part of your mind to say, that part wasn't exactly right. They've already decided, me like Trump. Therefore, nothing but praise for him, nothing but scorn for those who are against him, and just compare him to people who you think are great historical figures. And say, he's like Jesus, he's like my God, and he's like MLK, and he's like my dad. Again, even though that makes no sense, because one's a segregationist, one fought segregation. So there you have it. And as I told you yesterday, go back and look at the segment, man. I said very simply, you think this is going to affect Donald Trump in a negative way when he goes into a super Christian university and says, 2 Corinthians over here, something like that. And Matthew, is this Matthew, Luke? Oh, it's Luke. The name of the Bible is Luke, this book of the Bible. Doesn't matter what the fuck he says. Whatever he says, they're going to say, yes, I like you, I love you, because they already have their mind made up, because that's how authoritarians work.